Monday. It's kind of a weird-ish Monday because here in the US, we're experiencing the side effects of daylight savings time. Good morning. This is Brenda Meller. This is my LinkedIn live show called Social Media Pie. And I'm delighted because I have Dr. Tonia Phanor who will be joining me for the discussion today. Hey, Tonia, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Good to be here.
Great. Well, I am delighted to have you. And I want to welcome our audience. I just put the ticker up on screen to join in on the conversation. And let's kick off this morning the right way. Drop us a quick comment. Let us know where in the world you are watching us from. And this is kind of the equivalent of the mic check. Like if I were to tap on my mic and say, can you guys hear me okay? Like this is the live broadcast check. So when I see comments coming in from our audience, I know the live stream is working. I know we're good to go. I've only had one moment, Tonia, when I've done these where the live stream wasn't picking up on LinkedIn. But luckily, because I did this little check, it was effective because I wasn't seeing comments. And then I realized, we need to put the YouTube live stream up. So it worked. So I see Miss Sushi is watching us. It looks like the live stream is working. So let's jump into our conversation. So we're going to be chatting today about mastering your voice. You can see our topic that's right above us. And before we jump into our conversation about the topic, I want to just take a moment and introduce Tonia. She and I have been connected virtually. We haven't met yet in person, but we've been connected virtually for a little while. And I was thinking about other individuals to bring on my show. And I always look for inspiring people who inform and educate you, the viewer. And I love Tonia's LinkedIn profile. She's a communications coach, a speaker, executive coach. And she talks about, communication. And I think this is so important, whether we're communicating virtually or in person. So Tonia, for those folks that are watching us today who aren't familiar with you, could you take a few minutes, tell us about you and your business?
Okay, well, thank you, Brenda, for having me on, first of all. And I love your tagline. It's about people who are inspiring to inform and educate you, because really that's like my whole life right there is about doing that. And my background is in education. And so definitely I'm passionate about educating people, and I kind of just switched gears into consulting coaching. But I started as an educator. I taught communication courses for various universities in like primarily Georgia, Florida area. And something I've always been passionate about communication since I was a little girl. Like I'm very glad that I had parents who were nurturing and inspiring me to speak and to have a voice, because we're going to talk about that today, but definitely that they encouraged me to speak up. And I actually thought in college that I was going to go into law because I was very passionate about like speaking up for people and things like that. But then ended up kind of going also speaking and also still passionate about that, but doing it to empower other people to use their voice as an educator. And so I've taught for over like 20 years as a professor at various universities. And then I started getting requests from business professionals and to train them individually, as well as to do trainings for different companies. And I started doing that even while I was teaching full time. And so, but within the last year, made the leap and was like, what, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and working with business leaders and professionals. And now that's what I do full time. So it's been great.
That's wonderful. It's so exciting to hear how your kind of your corporate career, so to speak, shaped to allow you to start a consulting business where people are seeing you as an expert, they're reaching out to you. And I imagine, kind of going back to our subject here, mastering your voice, I imagine along the way, you have mastered your voice. So tell us a little bit about, your journey to picking communication as a field for your career, and how give us a little bit more about your business too, and tell us a bit more about some of those communication tips.
So one thing I think that I would not ever say that I've completely mastered. I think that we're all continually on a journey to improve. But yes, this is what I've done for over 20 years. So I have a level of expertise, but definitely it's one thing that you continue to grow every day. in working on that. But since I was a little girl, like I said, I've always been pretty passionate. I've never been afraid to like talk in front of an audience or anything like that. But I definitely, just had some apprehension when I started teaching as a professor. I wasn't much older than my students. And so just having that confidence, really mastering your voice starts with your mindset and really building that confidence in who you are and what you have to share. And so I had to learn that very early on, and definitely because, students will see right through you. You got to walk in the classroom and know who you are, and they're going to have questions. They're going to challenge you. And so that's where, I started to hone my craft more and just confident in what I had to share. And then as, other opportunities present themselves, then learning different dynamics within the corporate space, within other areas, and just being confident in who you have to. Most of my work with clients, I have to work on mindset first because they feel inadequate. There's imposter syndrome. There's all these things that are blocking them from really being able to share their voice and share their message. And so really mastering your voice really starts with your mindset and who you, believe that you are, the message that you have. And then later, definitely perfecting that message and delivery. And there's things we can do for that. But really it starts here.
I would imagine. And as you were talking, Tonia, just made me think of like when I was growing up, I was a good student, but I was always painfully shy. And I hated when teachers would call on me. And I remember my high school, I think we did a speech class, and I was like, I would get up and my lips would quiver and I would shake. I was so nervous. And by the end of the class, I was like, oh, I can talk in front of a room. And then I would get nervous all over again. But I'm wondering, like, I was an introvert, and I still am an introvert, and I embrace that. Do you find that introverts struggle more with communication and finding their voice versus extrovert, or is it kind of equal on both sides?
It can be, someone can be good in like social settings, but then when it comes to public speaking, they can still be terrified. I have people that are actors who are in business, who are CEOs, and it's not that necessarily they're introverted, but when, I don't know, the spotlight is on you, sometimes people just, depending on the situation, they still get nervous. And so know all of you that are feeling this, and even in particular situations, if I know when I had to present before faculty or different things, like, because I know just how critical, Ph.D. people can be about certain things, I might get a little more nervous than I would be in front of students or in front of. So certain situations can maybe cause different types of nervousness. And depending on what's happened, and there are situations that, say you had a bad situation or even personally in your life, that can bring on anxiety. And so definitely it can come at any stage, to any personality type. It's very common when they do studies of top fears that people have. Public speaking is usually number one.
Yeah.
And so I've never taught a class when I asked them at the beginning of the class, what's one thing they want to overcome? Fear. Every time, so it's a very common thing. So, but it doesn't mean that it has to limit your ability to speak well. And you can still feel that nervousness, but it's just not letting it show. And so, and knowing that people can't see your stomach, the butterflies in your stomach, people can't see your sweating hands, and yes, if they're shaking, but you can try to keep them still. But if you don't give away and you still operate and confident, and you give the appearance that you're confident, people will believe you. So it's really, starting there, and even though you might have that little, and it's okay to be a little bit nervous, like if you're an athlete before a game or a musician before, it's okay to have that. It just shows you care about what you're doing and you want it to be good. But you, instead of letting it enable you, you can let it fuel you and empower you to have that kind of motivation to do well.
Yeah, I love it. It's kind of like taking that nervousness and putting it into energy a little bit, isn't it? Yeah. And you made me think when you were talking like about, you said certain situations can make you more nervous than others. And Varsha even commented, when everyone's looking forward to hearing you, it can make you a little bit more anxious. And I have to agree, Varsha. And even like today, Varsha, when I was getting ready to pull Tonia into LinkedIn Live, I'm like, oh my gosh, you guys, this is a communication expert I'm going to be interviewing. And I started like, it was going into my head, my mindset, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh no, she's going to think I'm not prepared. She's going to think I talk too fast. We go through that dialogue in our head, but to your point, no one can see that I have butterflies because that's just a feeling I'm having. What I found is just kind of embrace and demonstrate that I'm enjoying the situation. And sometimes I'll just kind of let people know what's happening. Why?
Mhm.
Well, why am I a little off today? Because I'm nervous. I'm interviewing Tonia. She's a communication expert.
No, not at all.
But I feel it makes us a bit human. So do you get that way, Tonia, when you're in a group of peers or fellow experts, quote unquote? Do you get nervous? And what are your advice for people on that?
So most of the time I'm excited about the opportunity, but even that like creates this adrenaline, and you're like, it can be like a little bit of anxiousness, but usually it's more turns into excitement.
Yeah.
And so sometimes before I know what I'm going to say, I might be nervous. Like if I have to give a keynote or a talk or something like that, where I know I need to like prepare a message. So before I know what I'm going to say, I get a little nervous, like, okay, what am I going to talk about?
Yeah.
But once I have my message and once I'm like, I have that down, then I'm not as nervous. But definitely you can feel those butterflies but stay focused on the main thing. For one, obviously as you're speaking and if you have to give a talk or presentation, stay focused on the message that you're giving and not what somebody's doing over there or your nervousness or, stay out of your head and really focus in on what you have to share and keep the main thing. And because we can get distracted, and then that's where the uhs, the ums, and we're starting to think about, okay, what am I talking about here?
Yes, yes.
You want to stay away from that and just focus on what you have to say, and really use it as your motivation and your why. Why are you doing this? I'm doing this because I want to inspire and empower other people, and that's my success right there. When I see students that were like you, that were nervous, but at the end of the class, they, can give the appearance, even though they might have a little bit of nervousness, but still can come up confidently and speak. Or business leaders going off into different areas. And now I see them doing lives and I see them, overcoming that fear. That's why I do what I do. So if you keep your why in mind, like, why am I doing this? Forget about all the negative energy and take the emphasis off yourself, but really think about what is the goal? What are you trying to attain in doing this? And let that be your motivation.
So that seems like this is kind of attacking the mindset issue, right? The why behind it, the value it gives you, the value it gives to your audience, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's why I started off with that, because really I can teach you, how to organize and outline your message. I can teach you some delivery skills and techniques. But if you go into it with a negative mindset and you're like, I can't do this. I hate speaking in front of people. Like, it's just going to defeat you, and you can forget everything that you have to say. And all of that starts to just overtake the message. And so a majority of the time I have to work on just really like, you are qualified to talk about this. You are able to do this, and getting through that. And then we can work on the organization of the message and the delivery, and you know what? And I'm sure you've seen it. Some speakers, now you should have good content and you should know what you're talking about, but they just have this charisma and this confidence, and you're just like hanging on to every word because they're just so on fire. You're like, okay, let me see how this, but you do need to still have a good message but that is a big part of it, is having that confidence to know that you're presenting something of value and that this can have an impact on other people's lives for the better. So to keep that in the forefront.
Yeah, keep that focus. And going back to that point about charisma, I mean, some people might say, well, Tonia, I can't be a great public speaker or communicator. I can't master my voice because I don't have that charisma. I'm not that type of person. Mm-hmm. I mean, what's your response to that? Can we develop charisma? Are there techniques we can use to make us seem like we're enjoying speaking more? Or do we just have to kind of go, I can't do that?
No. So my response to that is great speakers are not born, they're made. And so no one started off like they just came out of the womb and just had a great, and they were great speakers. You can look at some of the best speakers today, and many of them had training to be where they are right now. And so they learn that charisma. In business, we call that executive presence and things like that. These things are taught. These things are not necessarily the natural. And so, yes, you have your natural habitual like conversation, but then when you're presenting, it's your optimal level. And so you just have to step it up and take it as far as your rate and your tone and having variation and not having a monotone voice and just like, act like you care about what you're talking about and have some, and it'll naturally come through. You don't have to fake so if someone's say they're a sports fan, they don't have to fake enthusiasm. They don't have to, that naturally, because they're excited about whatever it is. So you can just still bring that same level of excitement to your speaking, and instead of letting the nervousness or anxiety take over.
That's a really good point. And I have even heard, and you guys, if you look back at my LinkedIn lives, when I first started doing it to where I'm at now, I mean, it's like, I think it's practice. I don't want to say practice makes perfect, because I don't think I'm perfect, but I think practice helps improve our experience as a speaker. And one thing I try to consciously do is smile as much as possible through these interviews, because for two reasons. It's much more pleasing, I think, to look at people who are happy on camera. And the other is it tricks my brain into thinking I'm having a good time. Like when my brain is going, well, she's smiling, she must be enjoying it. And then you hear my enthusiasm go up, right?
No, there are actual studies that smiling does change like the chemistry and endorphins in your body. Like there is literally, and when you smile at someone else, it does the same for them too. And so I know I'm a smiler. And so this whole mask situation, like things like that, I'm like,
it's so hard. It's like you want to get a mask that has a smile on it, because people
I'm speaking in Atlanta next week, and I'm at this huge conference, and I'm like, I can't just be in this exhibit hall all day. And so there's a mask with a little clear space, so I can still smile. But no, definitely smiling does make, and obviously your expressions, you want it to match the tone and the energy. This is fun and lighthearted. So if you were like sitting serious the whole time, that wouldn't be beneficial to the show. But definitely letting that come through. And I do think that will help you to feel good about, what you're doing as your expressions and your tone and everything matches that. Yeah.
Good point. So I want to kind of round us to another question now, mastering your voice. And I think about, does that mean one thing? Is everyone going to be the same type of a speaker? Are we all destined to become charismatic speakers? Or, is there only a one size fits all in terms of how to master your voice? Or is there some flexibility based on our personality and goals? What do you think?
There is no cookie cutter, like this one way. Just as we are all individually unique people, you will be all individually unique speakers. But my goal as a coach is to help you to be the best you that you can be. That you can be, some people are naturally kind of humorous in their communication. Some people, they might be more scientific, and I've done workshops with CDC and different things, and where they have to present very scientific information, but in a way that people can understand it and relate to it. And so not every type of speaker is going to be the same, but it can still be engaging. It can still be clear. It can still relate to the audience and pull them in. And there's certain habits of effective speakers that you can adopt, but not everyone is going to have. And this also is mastering your voice. And so I don't want you to master somebody else's voice, but mastering your voice. And as you learn, how to naturally, I am more of a soft-spoken person. And my husband will tell you that he's more louder than me, but he's like, oh, what'd you say? So naturally, my voice is more softer, and you have to learn what is best for you. Like some people may be loud. They might have to bring it down a notch. So some people, depending on where you're from, how you were raised, some people were, they were hushed a lot in their life, and it just affects how you communicate. So you have to work on those things that help you to be the best speaker that you can be. And yes, I can teach you some tips and skills that good, effective speakers do, like relate to your audience. Obviously, that's key. Start there first. Like, there should never be a canned speech. The speech is not about you. Yeah. It's all about your audience. How can you bring value to that audience? And that's where you start. And you know that in marketing, and you know that with, everything. Everything is about the audience. And that's the same thing in speaking. And so you start there, and then how can you bring value, to that message? And of course, there should be some dynamics. There should be hopefully a level of spontaneity. You don't want to just be reading to your audience, and you want to have that engagement with them. But people do that in different ways. And so even me as an educator, I'm very results driven in how I train and how I coach. That's kind of my foundation. But different people are going to have different styles.
That's good. And I love the engagement. I can even imagine you as a professor, using that method of kind of pulling people up from your class. Or calling on the quiet ones and saying, Brenda, we haven't heard from you yet.
Oh my goodness. You took the words out of my mouth. Yes, I look for the ones who are looking away, trying not to be called on, because those are the ones that I really want, because you will have those who are naturally more outspoken, and I don't want them to dominate, in that space, but I want to give voice, especially to those who are less likely to put themselves up front. And so yes, do impromptus, and if you do coaching with me, we're gonna be working, and you're gonna be speaking, because I don't think you can get better if you don't actually put it into practice. Like going to a swimming class and watching videos of swimming. Yes, it's good, but you need to actually learn the strokes and do it in order to get better.
Right.
You can't just watch it or talk about it.
Can you become a better speaker just by watching a bunch of people? Can I look at other lists of motivational speakers and just watch them?
Yes, it helps to. So when you practice, when you say practice makes perfect, not necessarily. There are people that talk all the time, but they're not necessarily effective communicators. But I do think when you are able to watch effective communicators, oftentimes I will show TED Talks or different things of really highly engaging great speakers to give examples of how it should be done. And so that's like an athlete who watches tape of great athletes. Yes, you can definitely learn from that, but then you have to go that extra step and put it into practice. And that's where the practice makes a difference. When you're practicing effectively, you're using the right tools and techniques, and you're not, so my dad was a golfer too. And, if you practice with the wrong form for a year, you're not going to be any better. But if you watch the, people that are good, and then you learn how to apply that to yourself, and then you practice, then yes, you can get better. So
yeah, that's awesome. And I agree, you practice, but you have to, maybe sometimes you do emulate, but sometimes you pull inspiration from different people. And one thing I was doing, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with Toastmasters, Tonia, the public speaker.
I've actually done presentations for them.
Oh, wonderful. And they when you were earlier, when you were talking about the ums and ahs, I remember there was an ah counter in our group that would keep track of how many times you would say it, not to embarrass you or belittle you, but just so you become aware. You say this 21 times. And I that's one of my pet peeves when I'm watching somebody who's a speaker, and even now listening to a LinkedIn Live or going on a Clubhouse event. And if I come into the event and the speakers, they are talking and every other word is it drives me batty, and I switch the channel or turn on the video. Thoughts on that? Any techniques that we can use to kind of work out those verbal pauses that aren't necessary?
So I will give this. So I grew up in Southern California. And I don't know if it was a California thing, but when I went to Pepperdine when I was an undergrad in California, and my professor, Rick Rowland, he was such a great professor, and he made us tape ourselves. The best exercise to do, I still do with my clients today, that once you see yourself, I used to say a lot. And I said, I don't know if that was a California thing or just growing up in the 90s. So I don't know what it was. But when I saw myself, that was it. I took it off. So one thing as far as eliminating those, what we call vocalized pauses.
Yeah.
Likes, and oh, my mom was good too. My mom would, like, if you told her, mom, she's like, no, I don't know. She would definitely call you on it. She would call me on it every single time. So having that in your mind, but obviously if you're giving a prepared talk, then always thinking about what your next point will be. So one example for those, I don't know if there's any musicians that are in the room or that play anything. So I had to take piano. Well, I didn't have to. I enjoyed it. I took piano when I was like 7 to like in my teens, and then I stopped, and that's a whole nother story. Okay, but I took piano. But one thing you learn when you're reading music is that you always have to like read ahead. You can't just focus on the note that you're on right now. Your eyes have to, and if you're playing it by memory, you're already thinking about what's the next thing. And so that's what keeps the rhythm and the pace. And that's a habit of effective speakers, that you have good rhythm and pace. All those vocalized pauses, they make your rhythm choppy. And so you want to avoid that. And so by thinking about what's the next thing I have to say, always having that in mind, or having a clear outline of where you're going. And it's okay to glance down on that, but you don't want it to stop your flow and your rhythm by having all those vocalized pauses. So that's one way. Once you know your message really well, then you won't need to use those to think about what you're going to say next.
Yeah, because that
is a bad habit. So try to just stop even in regular conversation, and then when you're presenting, it'll be better. So
that's a good point. Your brain is thinking of what you're going to say next, right? When you're doing that. I even encourage people, when you're watching a TED Talk or when you're watching a LinkedIn Live, as an audience member, you're saying as a speaker, think about the next thing you're going to say. As an audience member, think about questions to ask, because it keeps your brain engaged. And it's also, you're learning, because you're as a student, you're always thinking, what questions could I ask to learn more about the subject, right? So when you think about questions to ask our speaker about the topic, it's helping the speaker, it's helping you, and it might bring some visibility to you as an audience member as well. But I love that tip of kind of thinking of what you're going to say next to eliminate the ahs and the ums. There's so many people, I think, Tonia, in public service that could benefit from working with you to help them kind of through that process.
Well, yes, I've seen it even within the communication area.
Yeah, well, it's true. I mean, there's some people that are, that's what they do for a living, is communications, and it's like, but they say or or they're having a hard time making eye contact with the audience or bringing the audience into the conversation. There's some gaps there for sure. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to shift our conversation. I just changed my ticker here, and I want to invite our audience. If this is a little setup for you, I just said, think of a question to ask, because we're going to now move into some Q&A with Tonia. So if you have any questions about mastering your voice, or if you'd like to add a comment into the conversation, go ahead and drop them below. And Tonia, just so you know, and as our audience as well, there's about a 30-second delay. So from the time I say drop your question below, it takes 30 seconds for that to go actually into the live stream. And then it might take our audience a few seconds, 30 seconds, to type out a question. So right now I'm kind of vamping. I'm adding in some additional time as some buffer to allow for those questions to come in. I just heard myself say too when I did that just while we are waiting for those questions to come in, I did see some earlier comments that I wanted to pull up on screen. You were talking about TED Talks, and I see Christopher Johnson. Hey, Christopher, he's online with us. He's part of the TEDx Detroit team, but he is also speaking on the TEDx stage this week. Tonia, any tips for Christopher about being that TEDx speaker up on stage?
So I'm sure he already has his message by now, but definitely, when you look at great TEDx Talks, I went to a live event last month. well, it was like virtually and live. But when I think about the speakers that move me the most, is really they made that emotional connection with the audience. And usually they have some type of personal story, or they do something that you're just like, literally, this one guy like had me in tears, almost in tears. But not to say you have to make your audience cry, but, and it could be happy, and some people are funny, but some type of emotional connection, making sure that, yes, you have great information, but with TED Talks is really that emotional connection and that impact that you're able to have on the audience, because people will remember stories. Like, people will forget facts, but they will never forget a great story. And so making sure that as a storyteller, you're really pulling them in, and that's really what will matter. And that's why they'll remember your talk, and that's why they will pull it up, and it'll have, 1,000 or thousands of views on when they post it. But I have clients that I've worked with them on their talk that they're going to do, and definitely there's a process. But TEDx is they vet, their people, and they're going to have some training involved with that too. And so, but that is one thing that I have worked with individuals on preparing for.
All right. Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing Christopher. I'm going in person, but I'm going to watch him virtually. So I'll see if he brings in an emotional element there. Our next comment comes from Sarabi, and she's saying, don't present at your audience. I have a question related to this. Engage them. So Tonia, can you give us any tips on how to engage your audience as a speaker?
Well, I actually just shared one with stories. And so when you have a great story, obviously you want to think about who your audience is and what story and examples are going to relate to them the most. But that definitely will engage you more, engage the audience more, and it pulls you in. You think about you watch a movie and you're like completely sucked into this movie. Like, it's like you're living that movie because you're so engaged in the storyline. And that's what a really good storyline does. And so as a speaker, we have to be able to share those stories in a way that engages the audience. And yes, we can do things like, as far as questions. If you're virtual, you can have them involved in the chat, and you can do different things to make sure they're active listeners. But definitely knowing who your audience is, telling stories and giving examples that relate to that audience, and then keeping them involved and engaged as active listeners definitely will help.
All right. Awesome. Great tips. And I see a couple more folks joined us. Marcia, I just want to say hello. Common Connections. And Gabe Neal. And Gabe, I think, has a question. Let me just scroll down. So here's Gabe's question. How do you get speakers to stop using those clutch words and effectively use pauses when speaking? See what I did just there?
You use that pause for emotional, they call it, what was you can use pauses for effect and have idea or main point stand out with a great pause. But as far as just in everyday communication, try to stop using those crutch words. And so if you know that, whatever your word is, when you're on the phone, when you're just having a conversation, try to eliminate those clutch words. And then we talked about it earlier, really organizing your message. And some people don't realize that they have a talk that they're going to give, and they have like 10 points. Stick to like 3 points, 3 main points that you're going to give, go into detail, have stories and examples for those points, so that you're not all over but trying to think about what you're going to say. That'll help a lot too. And you have an organized message. You're really working on it, not just when you're presenting, but every day as you're talking on the phone, as you're talking with people, trying to avoid those words. And it's okay if you use them very occasionally. It's not going to stand out. But when it's every other word, then of course people are going to start to notice those that's one of the things that you do. And so just continue to work on a daily basis and really organize your message well. And of course, practice. And you have to go over it several times before it'll feel comfortable, and you know exactly what you're going to say next, and you can have that conversation with your audience.
Good point. I think, just to reiterate that, it's okay to have those clutch words. I mean, it's not like we're going to like shoot you down in public, like, no, you can't say those at all. But to be aware of them will help you to reduce them. And remember earlier in the interview, if you guys were watching, I said or I don't remember which one it was, but then I caught myself. I said, oh, I just said it. Like I'm developing like those ears, and it's helping me to eliminate them. So really great point there. Let's see. Oh, I just did it again. Did you hear that? Nikki loves your tip, Tonia, about thinking of the next line, what you're going to say next. Related to that, I mean, what are your thoughts on, Tonia, should we memorize a speech when we're presenting it, or is it better to speak off of the cuff as it relates to kind of knowing what comes next? What are your thoughts there?
So first, I gotta say, hey, Nikki, definitely we know her, and glad she's joining us today. So I do not.
Is she with us in Liz?
Yeah, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I got to give a shout out right now. Liz J. Simpson. I'm going to tag her in comments, and a lot of us has met through her programs called the Big Money Movement. So I got to just give it a quick shout if you don't mind. But go ahead, and I'll let you take it.
So yes, so no, I would not recommend that people memorize their speech. I also would not recommend that they write out their speech word for word. What I do with most of my clients is I have an outline template that I've developed, and I've used in education as well as for corporately to help you organize your message, organize your ideas. You have key points. Like I said, keep those points to like 3 or 4 points. You don't need to have 10 points because people are not going to remember that. Our brain can only process so much information at one time. So usually about 3 points is good. And so as you develop your presentation, you want to make it extemporaneous and that you can speak from a brief set of notes that is prepared, and that does take practice, but that you're not trying to read something word for word in a manuscript, but you're also not trying to have everything by memory. And so you feel like you have to say it exactly the same way every time. Yes, I do think it's good to know your introduction because it just gets you in a good flow. So if you're going to ask a question or you're going to do something like that right at the beginning, that's okay to know that pretty much by memory, how you're going to start the presentation. But like your whole presentation, to have that by memory, no, not word for word. You can have your intro, guess what your key points will be. If there's a particular quote or something you want to add in, that's fine, but it puts too much pressure and then people feel like they've messed up the whole presentation if they didn't say something exactly the same way. But you want to give yourself freedom to be able to improvise and to be able to have a conversation with your audience and take cues from your audience. They might bring in things that you didn't initially have planned to say, but it could add so much value to your talk. So don't put these strict, constraints on yourself when you talk to where you feel so much pressure to say it the exact same way every time.
Yeah, really good point. And I think I've seen people do that too. You can tell that they memorize their speech, trying to be the best presenter possible, but it kind of backfires on them because if they forget a line, and then you can almost see their mind going, oh, they just forgot where they were at. And then, it causes kind of a little bit of a awkward situation until they kind of readdress and then jump back into it. And we are kind of nearing the end of our time in our talk today, Tonia. So I wanted to pull up on screen. I pulled up your LinkedIn profile up on screen, and I see that your headline reads communication coach, speaker, executive coach, trainer, author. I want to come back to that, and educator. So have you published a book?
I've actually published 2 books and I'm working on my 3rd right now.
Wow. What are your books about? Tell us.
So my first 2 books was more inspirational. So the first book I ever wrote was called Changing Lanes, Understanding Your Lane in Life. And like I said, I was a college professor working with so many students who didn't know what they wanted to do. And I understood it myself. I had no idea that I would be a professor. I had no idea I'd be a coach one day. So kind of understanding where you want to go, looking at your talents and your gifts, what you're naturally inclined to do. So that was my first book, kind of helping people have a roadmap to find out what they were passionate about. And then my second book was more for women, and it's more of an inspirational book, just kind of help them look inwardly and also deal with communication and relationships. And that one's called The One A Woman's Search for Eternal Love. And that's more dealing with like relational communication in that area. And then my book I'm working on now is, it could be for women or men, but it's the purpose and power of your words, and just looking at communication and how we use words and how we can use it to inspire others and change the environment and create things with our words.
Awesome. And you saw what I was trying to do. I was trying to pull up Amazon to see if I can find your book.
It is available on Amazon.
So I found one. It's called A Woman's Search for Eternal Love. I couldn't find the Changing Lanes one on
that was my first book in 2005. So I think it's still available, but definitely you can go to my website too, drtoniaphanor.com. And if you contact me, I can definitely get access to those. But I think they're both still available.
Okay, let me pull up your website here. I'm getting an error message, but maybe I typed it in wrong. So I'm just going into the chat to grab the link that you gave me earlier. And www. Oh, I'm getting a 404. It could be my Wi-Fi. So I'll just drop that into a banner right now for folks that might be looking to learn more about you and check out your books or any of the other resources that are available. But while we are wrapping that up, I want to bring back your LinkedIn profile up on screen again here. And are you open to connecting with individuals who are watching the presentation here today, Tonia?
Of course. Of course, I would love to connect with just to hear your comments, your feedback. If you would like to receive coaching, obviously, definitely let me know. And just to hear from those who are involved today would be great.
Wonderful. And speaking of, so tell us, I mean, I heard you say you work with individuals on coaching. Is it executives? Is it anyone? Do you work with teams? Tell us a little bit about who you work with and how you serve them.
Really, I've worked with all of the above. Definitely, obviously, I started with young adults, and then I also work with individual business owners. I've done coaching. Just last week, I posted a coaching I did for staff training. They did a lunch and learn training for their staff on communication. I've done full day trainings, half day trainings. So it just depends on what people need. And I've also worked, individually with people on their communication skills, as well as have my own programs. So I did Communicating with Confidence Intensive, was just like a 2-day program, but I also have a monthly program for women that is in a group setting, and we meet and coach weekly.
Wonderful. Well, sounds like lots of great resources on there, Tonia. It's been a delight chatting with you here today. And I just want to thank you so much. Any final comments before we wrap up here?
No, it was great to be here. And like I said earlier, great speakers are not born, they are made. So definitely it's something that you can continue to work on and we can continue to grow at. So don't feel like, oh, I'll just never be, a good speaker. But no, that is something that you can learn, just like any other art form, whether it's music or it's an art form, and it's something that we have to continue to practice and continue to work on to get better. But it's been a pleasure meeting, virtually.
Right, I'm today. Chatting with you, yeah.
I know, and so I feel like we've met in person.
I know. I was trying to think have we? But I think it's just been the monthly coaching calls and things that we've been on together. But yeah, I feel like someday we'll all meet in person, but right now it's just virtual for everyone practically.
So,
yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, Dr. Tonia Phanor, for joining me here today, talking about mastering your voice. And as we wrap up our conversation, I want to thank our audience so much for watching. Whether you are watching in live or in playback, we'd still love it if you could drop a comment below. That way we know that you're watching. And if there was a question you had for Tonia, you can still drop those in comments. I will share the playback link with her so she can check those out later. And here's my little bonus tip for all of you. When you're done watching the video, go back onto my activity feed and there's a link to share the video. Share that along with your network and tell people something that you learned by watching. I'm going to say that again. When you're done watching the video here, whether it's live or playback, click on the share button, share that video as a LinkedIn post, and tell people something that you learned by watching. We're kind of in an education focus for the topic here today. And this is a way of showing or, demonstrating how you're continually learning, a lifelong learner, if you will, and also adding to your knowledge base while helping to educate your community as well. All right, Tonia, I'll let you get back to your day, and I'll see you on I think our next coaching call with Liz is Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, thank you for having me.
All right, guys, stay safe and stay healthy, everyone. And we'll see you all on LinkedIn. And be sure to subscribe to the Meller Marketing VIP email list if you'd like to get notification of my future videos in this series. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you all on LinkedIn. Take care.